Okay, we're ready to, yes?
At 1 o'clock, we will be.
We'll be ready to go. Guess that's 30 seconds from now.
Oh, okay. So we're just waiting on Director Gisborne.
Okay. As soon as he returns, we'll go.
Running.
Okay. I think we're all here now. So welcome everyone to the Finance Committee meeting, Wednesday, April the 5th. I'd like to first call the meeting to order and make a land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tla'amin Nation, as well as all Coast Salish nations on whose traditional territories we have the honor to live, including my home on Ko'e'ete, also known as Lasqueti Island. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there any changes, or would someone like to move approval of the agenda? Okay, Director Gisborne, Director McCormick, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, adoption of the minutes. So we have the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting, March the 1st, 2023. Are there any additions or changes anyone would like to propose? Seeing none, I would ask if someone would like to move adoption of the minutes. Director Lennox and Director Brander. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, on to delegations. So we have, as a delegation, Melanie Munroe and Arthur Arnold from PRISMA. I don't know if they're in the audience or if they're on attending remotely. They are? Okay.
I'm here.
Okay, so over to you. I can see you now. Thank you. We got a backwards camera. So welcome to you both. You, I believe is it 10 minutes?
Yeah, I'll do shorter.
It'd be shorter. Okay, fine. You can present to us, and then we'll maybe some of the board will have some questions for you.
Right. Then it might be 10 minutes. Thanks for having me here. First of all, and I say this every year, but thank you for your support for PRISMA every year. I woke up this night thinking about, some things. That's how it sometimes goes. And I thought, we live in a world where we try to get likes, and when we get a lot of likes, we feel great. Where we don't talk to each other anymore because we're on our phones. I see that in the trains in the Netherlands, or in the buses, or we live in a world where where a president who I've met personally and talked to for 10 minutes starts a war, I feel that the importance of connecting to each other is hugely important. And sometimes I think if we would understand the depth of the need, I think I would run away, but I don't understand how much this is needed. I think I'd get a little grasp on how important it is to connect to each other. And I think that, I know that in PRISMA, my main goal and the main goal of our staff, Mel is our new general manager. She's fantastic. That we, in the first place, try to create a safe environment for our students, for our staff, to help each other, to support each other, to inspire each other through music, but also in the work that we do. And I feel that what we do in this town and in this region is hugely important. And again, I don't know how important it is. My gut feeling says it's like in this world where we are getting used to the word climate change, and where we are getting used to 1.5 degrees, we start to get used to that too. We need to connect as human beings. we are like a big train that is just going forward, and it's hard to stop. I don't think we should stop, but we should keep connecting. I was in the schools. I see you here, Sandy. I was at Texeda School. Mel came. I was at Jenny's school and Kelly Creek at the other schools. It was so lovely to see those kids so open. And then I said, I'm going to play something really, really calm for you. And they laid down on their things and cuddled in. And, you know, I think that we have it here, that we have live music here, as well as Cathau, as well as an Academy of Music, that we have that here is a blessing. For us, now I come to the business part. For us to plan this every year, it would be great if we can get some commitment from the regional district, in the sense that we know what we can count on. Artists, especially on the caliber that we hire, have commitments many years in advance. I have my bookings already for 2025. And it's good to have some security. Now, the history shows that you have supported PRISMA every year since its inception, and before that, SOAP always. So I thought I feel kind of confident to ask you, would you consider deciding if you want to make a commitment for a certain period? I put 5 years in, but I mean, that's up to you. Yeah, that's basically my question, so that we can, with security, continue this work in this region. And it's not only in this region, you know, and go to the PRISMA website and look at the Academy website and what students say in their comments, how they feel welcome here, how they feel included here, how they feel safe here. It's very different in many other parts of the world, where universities, where it's competition and it's fights. We don't want that here. I had a Zoom meeting with two conducting students that are coming this year. The first thing I asked them, are you supporting that we support our students? And we're not here for you. We are helpers. We are not there for this, right? So anyway, that's the background of my request. Simple question.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. So I think, I mean, I don't know if we'll be able to give a direct answer. I know there's two today, because it'll take a little bit of work to consider that. There's the application for this year, which we'll for sure be considering when we consider all the financial requests, as we normally do, probably in May. But I'll open up the table to questions from any of the directors, the committee members. Director McCormick.
Yes. And thank you, Arthur, for all that you do, you know, to make PRISMA a success. My question is on the multi-year contract. Do you have those currently, like with the City of Powell River or anyone else? And what's your timeline? Where are you at?
Yes, we have it with the City of Powell River and multi-year contract. I think we had a 3-year that is prolonged with 2 years, and we have it with BC Ferries. We have each time a 3-year contract is our main sponsor.
And are you in the first, second, or third year of those?
I think that, if I recall it, we are in the last year of our city, but maybe maybe we have 1 more year, and BC Ferries is 1 more year, I believe. But I honestly don't dare to say that for 100%.
No, I just ask because it makes sense that should we decide to go this route, that it time well with your other multi-year agreements, so they all expire at once and you don't have to.
Well, you know, or not, because then there's this staggering kind of.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick. Director Gisborne.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming in today. Absolutely hearing what you're talking about with music and making that connection. With my father and my child, that I think it's like music therapy is one of those aspects of trying to get like people out of their shell, or to get people with disabilities to even start, you know, speaking again, and music really has an impact. So, like, would you agree that the PRISMA and music aspect really has a social benefit to the community? Is that like one of the big aspects of like it really helps deep connection to people? That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, music does that. I mean, when somebody dies, what do we want? We want music. When somebody gets married, we want music. When 9/11 happens, people started singing on the street corners. When the war started in Ukraine, people started singing together in the basements. It's music that connects us. Yes, for sure. Now there's also the economic development that for you is maybe even more important or equally important. I don't know. Shouldn't fill it in. But we also bring a lot of dollars to this community, you know, in the 2-to-1 multiplier.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I asked the question is we have a number of different funding sources, you know, social planning service, economic development service. And, you know, when we do get to such a request, it becomes a question amongst the board of like, well, which one does really fit, which, you know, for you, I'm sure it's like a dollar is a dollar. It's just kind of more for us.
Well, yeah. And I think that maybe if you agree that might be a choice that you have to make where it fits best. I think we do both. I mean, we got the award for what is it called? Tourism award from the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, that was pretty cool. And we do bring a lot of money to Powell River. But we also bring a lot of joy to Powell River. So maybe it goes hand in hand.
Okay, Director Gisborne. Director Lennox has a question.
Thanks for your presentation. You know, I'm a product of this type of effort in our community.
Right.
And so historically, the school district has been involved, you know, band and introducing students. If I remember grade 5 or 6, we were introduced, put an instrument in your hands, and that's just changes your life. Are you still coordinating with the school district? How does that really work? I feel like their funding is kind of, we struggle with their funding, and how does that come together?
We get every year support from the school district. It's not sponsorship. It is partnership to put on PRISMA for kids. This last week, I went to all the elementary schools to play for kids, to talk to them about music. I've talked this year about major and minor keys, and Mahler in his first symphony, one of the pieces we will play this year, used Frère Jacques in the minor key because he was very sad. Because, well, I told that story to the kids. I don't want to tell it here, but yes, we are still partnering with the school district to bring on PRISMA for kids, and that will develop into a open rehearsal for the students where they can come and I'll explain about that specific movement, and we'll play with the full orchestra. Pretty unique to hear a full orchestra in a little town. And then we have a special concert at night for kids that starts earlier, that starts with a fun fair, face painting, ice cream, lemonade, and then they go to a concert that is especially tailored for them, and the school district supports.
So that's an ongoing relationship with the school.
Yeah. That's not on a multi-year contract, but I'm confident we get it again this year.
Yeah, thank you.
Historically proven.
Okay, Director Doubt.
Yeah. Thanks for doing what you did. And, you know, I attended PRISMA last year, and I understand a lot of the stuff. Something that I hadn't participated in before was some of the tutoring or the private lessons, basically, where you could go and went and watched a number of them where you had different people with instruments and they would play a piece, and then the experts that were there would spend a couple of minutes speaking to them, and students would try again, and it would be a completely different piece that we heard the second time.
Right.
You know, I don't know a heck of a lot about music, except that I love it.
Yeah.
And to see the learning experience going on was really something new. And I get what you're saying, that it, you know, I think the number in the report is something like $1.2 million that it brings into the community.
Yeah.
That's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
But the fact that, you know, this music, this world-class music is here in our community, and it brings together all the facets of the community that often are not together.
Mm-hmm.
And before the meeting, you were talking a little bit about some of the things that have divided us through COVID in the past years. But when we have an event like PRISMA, we can all get together in the same room and everybody can find a way to find joy in the same thing. And that, I think, is extremely important to our community and to bringing us together and to get some cohesiveness, I think. And, you know, when the time comes, I'm in favor of a multi-year agreement, because I know if you're trying to plan a repetitive event that keeps happening year over year, you need to be able to have some confidence that there's seed money there to work on.
Thank you, George.
Keep doing it, and you're doing a
sure.
great job.
My baby.
Maybe one day I'll go to one of those lessons and actually learn something myself.
We're waiting.
I see Director Palm with his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Arnold,
Mr. Paul.
we've been meeting for quite a number of years now, and
Yeah.
it will be an annual basis, but you twig my memory bank. We did sign a 2 or 3 year agreement with you. So does it mean you're not coming to the city this year to our table?
I will be there on May 2nd.
Well, you are coming.
I'll come every year to thank you and to
Excellent.
give you little updates.
So as we all know, when the mill was thriving,
Yeah.
and they were looking for employees, what did they reach out to when they were looking to bring people here? They had to have some special skills. It was either in music,
Yeah.
or it was sports.
Ah.
And that's why we have such a rich, our great sporting heritage and arts and culture in this town, as we all know, as a pillar.
Isn't that amazing? Sorry to
So
interrupt.
it's
so amazing.
a great thing.
Yeah.
I'm more on the sporting side,
I
not
know.
so much on the cultural side. However,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure to have you in our community doing what you do every year and bringing people here. And when I was first elected, I was trying to bring more people here through tournaments. But at that time, when I reached out to the athletic community,
Yeah.
all of our volunteers were long in the tooth and they were burnt out. And I couldn't get more events coming here. But we did create the Hall of Fame
Yeah.
for sports, and it worked out all right.
Yeah.
So my point is, when you first came to the city hall, and I'm just going to ask the question of staff when I go down this road.
Through the chair, please.
20,000 coming from the RD comes from electoral areas only, or does the city also contribute to this?
Acting CEO, do you have an answer for the?
Thank you. Through the chair, I would defer this question over to Manager of Financial Services, Linda Greenan, or to Susan Callenhoven.
Okay, Ms. Greenan, are you
thank you, Chair. Actually, I would like to, if I could, just direct it to the Assistant Manager of Financial Services, as he generally has been dealing with the financial assistance requests.
Okay, Mr. Cohenhoven, are you there?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here. Very briefly, all of the funding to PRISMA in recent years has come from electoral areas A, B, C, and D, and that's either through the Grant and Aid program or through Economic Development Service.
So the city does not contribute any to the funding that is being asked for at this table today. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you for that. So I welcome you here. Because I'm just filling in for Director Elliott. Out of town. I'm going to ask the question on behalf of the city.
Yeah. Okay. I see. I'll be bombarding the city later.
Happier to see you here today. I'll let the discussion continue.
Oh, the city will suffer too. Don't worry.
Thank you, Director Palm. I know they're in the red here in the time, but are there any further questions before we? So I'd like to thank you, Mr. Arnold, and I'd just like to say, we will consider your application for this year for sure in May, and we've heard your request for the multi-year agreement. I think this isn't the moment we can really discuss it as an item to consider, but I expect we'll hear more from that, and it'll it's in our ears, and we will probably consider it at some point in the future.
Thanks very much. Easter Monday, 2:00, I do a free concert in the Fraser Theater, cello and piano. If you want to come, you're welcome. When the turkey is cooking in the oven. See you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I agree entirely with the importance of connections. That's very good.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Okay, committee. So that was our delegations and inquiries. We have no unfinished business. We have 2 items of correspondence. Are there any, is there any business business of those items of correspondence?
I have a question.
Yes, Director Gisborne.
Oh, and I'm not sure if Director McCormick had her hand up first.
No, you go ahead. I'll go next.
Yeah, this is the new grant. Oh, I've already lost GCF.
So item 6.1.
Yeah. When I first saw this grant, I thought it was, the money coming to the regional district was only for electoral areas, and the municipality would get their own money just for the municipality, kind of similar to community works funds. But reading this letter, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I see they've got this kind of broken down into a flat amount of 500,000, and then a per capita for the entire region, and then a rural population per capita. But then it also talks about rural population growth as $1,000 per capita population growth in the rural areas between 2016 and 2021. But maybe I missed something, but I'm trying to figure out like what was that figure? Like what was our rural population growth between that amount? Because I'm trying to make the numbers add up in my head, because I thought it was just for the rural population, but it turns out I'm wrong. So
okay, so for the moment, and I'll add to that question, because I think we'll be probably this will move forward and we'll have to have some discussions, but maybe I'll ask Ms. Green and Manager of Financial Services if she has comments on how that number arrived at, but also if she might have comments on the process from here, because it's very nice to receive 1.367 million. That's excellent news, but the question then becomes, well, how do we decide where it gets used?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair. Yes. So our population growth between 2016 and 2021, according to the census, was 550 residents within the rural area. So the way that the grant has been calculated for the regional district is that a $500,000 flat amount, $17 for the rural population, and then a further $30 for the rural population, as well as $1,000 for the growth of 550 people, which comes to 1.367, 1,367,000.
Thank you for that. Director Gisborne, I see your hand.
Yeah, I heard 17 per rural population and 30 per rural population. Maybe I misheard.
17 per capita total and 30.
Yeah, for the whole region. Okay. Yeah. That's making sure my notes are correct.
Ms. Green, will there be, just in terms of process, is there any ideas yet on the staff side of how this funding will be, will come forward as projects, or will there be a report, or?
We don't have any, I haven't heard any suggestions yet. We haven't wrapped our heads around that, but once we delve into it, we'll work with the asset management group and the other management team to look at what this would best be used for.
Okay, great, thank you. And I see, so Director Doubt has his hand up. Thank you, Ms. Green.
I was just on a point of order, Chair.
Sorry, I was going to call.
I heard the chair say my name.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, Director Doubt has the floor.
Point of order was that normally under correspondence, we ask if there is any business arising out of the correspondence to make the meeting go a little quicker. But I haven't heard anybody so far with any business arising out of the correspondence. I've just heard questions about it.
Yeah, quite right. So I think sometimes questions to clarify what's in the correspondence is good, but I think going into detailed discussion should have a motion. Director McCormick, you have your hand?
Yes, I did. Thank you. And depending on how the discussion goes, will lead to where we might go with any motions. So two questions. One is I'm looking at the chart. I guess it's on page 4 of the minister's letter at the very end. And it goes through all of the various components of the funding for a total grant of 4.505 million. And I'm just wondering how that morphed into 1.3.
An example. Yeah,
Ms. Greenan, that's an example, actually.
Oh, okay. So this isn't accurate then for us.
Correct. The amount we have is in the cover letter. It says 1.3. 367.
Let's look at the header.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, Chair, is, I guess it comes from page 3 of her letter in the second paragraph where she says the grant must be allocated to an appropriate regional district services by the end of the year. So my question then is, would improvement district water systems be eligible to receive a chunk of this money?
There's a question for Ms. Greenan.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, we do have a, we did ask that question, and we would, if they did want funding from us, that would be contingent on the improvement district transferring their assets to the regional district once the upgrades were completed.
Director McCormick?
Yeah, thank you. That's, you know, a bit stressful because of course, we've seen improvement districts struggle, not just in my area, but in others as well, struggle to find, you know, funding to upgrade the water systems to meet government regulations. And we had asked through UBCM for a one-time fund to help improvement districts. And I kind of had hope that this was it, but given that if that is the requirement that they turn over their assets to the regional district, then it isn't what we had asked for. So I appreciate that clarification. Thank you very much.
Okay, so committee, do we have any business arising from and any further questions? So we will see where this rolls out forward. We'll be hearing back from staff on it with further discussions. So with that, we'll move on. There's no motions. I don't believe I see anyone's hand up. Okay, so there's no, so we're on to item 8. So 8.1, Sunshine Coast Tourism Service Agreement. And there's a recommendation there. Someone, Director McCormick?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, seconded by Director Lennox. So is there any discussion on that? Director McCormick?
Yeah, thanks. Just to say that I think it supports the certainty that Sunshine Coast Tourism will have out of a multi-year agreement, and they provide so much in the way of marketing and information that gets out there that you know, the revenue that we receive from the number of visitors, I think is really, really worth, I think it's money well spent. So I see a lot of regional benefits from that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other Director Gisborne?
Thank you. I read the staff report, and it talks about contributing funds on a multi-year agreement from Economic Development Service and Area B Grant and Aid. And while I support, you know, Sunshine Coast Tourism and what they're doing for our region, Area B Grant and Aid, as I understand it, is, you know, supposed to be looked at every year. Like having a grant and aid that we have a multi-year agreement for, just it doesn't quite sit right with me, because Area B is not part of the Economic Development Service. So like, I'm fine contributing funds from Area B Grant and Aid. I'm just not a huge fan of, you know, committing Area B Grant and Aid, you know, for the years to come. Area B Grant and Aid really should be looked at each year. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. Thank you, Chair. Okay,
thank you. And maybe I'll ask Ms. Our Manager of Financial Services if, you know, that I guess that multi-year agreement right now, the draft one has that built in from both of those services. So is it even possible to separate them like Director Gisborne's asking, or is that too complicated?
Thank you, Chair. I actually would like to direct this question to the Assistant Manager of Financial Services, if that's okay.
That's quite fine.
Thank you.
Owen, it's your hot potato.
Thank you, Chair. In the past, when we've had service agreements that were funded by grants and aid or economic development programs, they were established at the time of the decision, and then they were not revisited each year. To separate those two things, I would say we would have to amend the agreement and separate those components so that there's a portion that lives specific to the Economic Development Service and another portion that we've considered each year for the grant and aid. Please let me know if that answers the question.
No, that answers it. So before us is the motion on the table is for the agreement that's in the report. So that's the motion that we're just debating. And so thank you, Mr. Cohenhoven. So is there any further debate on that item before us tonight? I'm going to bring up Director Gisborne, or so. Does anyone else have their hand up? Okay, so I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Thank you. Item 8.2, Resource Recovery Center and Waste Transfer Station Loan Authorization Bylaw. And the recommendation is to recommend the board give first through third reading of the bylaw. Committee, what's your wish? Would anyone like to move that recommendation or something else? Director Brander's moving it. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Director Doubt.
Oh, Director Doubt. Sorry,
I'm blocking him a bit there.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, Director Lennox. So Director Doubt, Director Brander, is there any discussion on this this item? Director Gisborne?
I have a question. Maybe it's my lack of sleep or all the other things on my plate. Just reading the staff report, the estimated cost of developing, constructing the Resource Recovery Center and Waste Transfer Station, including expenses incidental thereto, is the sum of $21 million. And this bylaw will borrow $6.4 million. So I can't recall, have we already borrowed money for this project, or and if so, how much have we already borrowed, or is this it? My apologies. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and I was pretty focused on this morning's planning issue.
That's okay. I believe I will turn that over to Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, through the Chair, we have authority right now to borrow, currently to borrow $5.5 million, and we have been drawing that down. So to date, we have drawn down just over 1.5 million of it. So we still have some money to borrow. It's still about $4 million that we can borrow from that borrowing, but the costs are starting to come in faster now. So we want to get this borrowing in place. So we draw down as we need the funding, and then we will turn it into a long-term debt through a security issuing bylaw.
That answer your question, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, so my understanding is that we've already borrowed 5.5 million, and now we're looking at borrowing another 6.4, which brings us up to roughly 11.9 million of borrowed for this project.
Ms. Greenan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. Borrowing 11.9 million.
That's a big number. Is there any other questions or comments from Director Palm?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, I need to wrap my head around. We originally got a $6 million grant in this regard for the site. Has all of that money been expensed? And now we're into borrowing for the remainder?
Ms. Greenan, can you enlighten us on that part?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have the Strategic Priorities Fund grant. We still have $1.8 million. When I last, at the 2023 budget, we still have $1.8 million of the $6 million grant to draw down on. And that's going quite quickly. So we should be drawn down on that by this summer. That will be fully expended.
And just a second question, just to wrap up here, that we now have a new figure, total budget, 21 million, as Director Gisborne just pointed out. That is up from the, I believe, C&D costs of 15 point some odd million previously that I've seen here at the RD. Is this now a more accurate figure than a C&D estimate?
Well, thank you, Chair. The C&D estimate was basically for the build out of all of the facilities. This $21 million total cost includes the the access road, the total cost of the access road, and the site closure, which the costs are already spent, but that is technically part of our total project cost. And then that also includes the furniture and fixtures, the artist reuse building, the resource recovery center equipment, scales, including equipment software. And so it's basically, that's the full project, but there's nothing new to add to the budget. That's all incorporated into the 2023 budget. That's like the balance is all incorporated into the 2023 budget. This 21 million is the full project from inception to the 2023 budget.
Right. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Okay, thank you. Director Doubt.
Yeah, so I understand that in this new number that we're seeing today of the total project costs, you mentioned the access road. And my understanding is that the access road was a capital project of the city and not, and is that true?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. The mechanics of it, I would have to direct to Arnold Schwab, the manager of asset management and strategic initiatives. But that is part of our, while the work is being done by the city, it is part of our project cost, and the city is going to be contributing half of that, which is approximately $900,000. And that's already been incorporated into the city's budget. I've talked to the manager of financial services, or the chief financial officer. So this isn't new funding. It's just reporting on the total project cost.
Thank you. Mr. Schwab, I see you there. If you have any information that can enlighten us on the question, plus anything more general about how this project rolls out in the context of the bylaw, the $21 million number, and so on.
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't really have anything to add to Ms. Greenan's report. That is essentially the way it was. I think the city was responsible for design, and the project was around 1.8 million, and it was a 50-50 cost split. So we're just, as she said, we're just sort of reporting on that number now. The rest of the project, we've gone over the numbers. We are relatively close to the number we want to be at currently, and there have been a few surprises just because of what was underground, but now that everything's coming out of the ground, like buildings and fixtures, we expect to sort of be within that realm of the budget.
Okay, Director Gisborne, I see your hand up for a question.
Yeah, a question for the second time. I'm sure we're all aware of the increasing interest rates for borrowing money, and that's where I have a lot of concern. I think we've got budgeted for maybe 6% increase. And I'm just wondering if there's any ways that we can potentially bring that capital down, that amount that's being borrowed. And my question, I guess, goes back to the correspondence of the Growing Communities Fund. Would it be possible at a future date to use some of the Growing Communities Fund to potentially offset some of this borrowing? Or does the Growing Community Fund have to, be utilized before the money is borrowed or spent? I'm just wondering, because potentially some of that, what $1.4 million, could that be potentially used to drop that down?
So I believe that's for Ms. Green, and I'd broaden the question to even ask, if Ms. Green, if you may, if we approve the bylaw for 6.4 million and we don't need it all because we allocate other funding or we reduce costs in some ways, could you lay out for us what happens with it? If we have approval, is it are we getting the money and incurring costs, or are we drawing on that and then we don't incur costs if we don't use it?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, yes. So this bylaw allows us to borrow up to. It's always up to $6.4 million. So we just draw on it as we need it. And, so if we have other funding, we could just not take out the borrowing and not draw the whole $6.4 million down. And the Growing Communities Fund waste transfer or waste management facilities are an eligible cost under the Growing Communities Fund. So it is a possibility that we could use some or all of that funding towards this, and that would definitely bring down our costs of borrowing.
That's great. Thank you for that. Okay, is there any further discussion on this item? Director Palm, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I have two more clarifying questions, and that is firstly to add to Councillor Doubt's questions. The city is responsible for design. City is paying 50% of access road. And I understand, if I am correct, I may not be, that the city is paying 100% of the water line to the property line of the site. Is that correct? From Street to the site?
I expect that's Mr. Schwab. I see his hands up, so I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you, through the chair. No, I believe the original agreement was we would pay for water and services within the property boundaries. The city would be responsible for the costs to bring the water line to the property.
Yeah, that's correct, 100% from Alberni to the property line. So that's an additional cost for the city. And then the second question, if we are now with this authorization of 6.4 going to be borrowing 11.9 million in total, is there still another borrowing coming down the road to get us to somewhere around the 21 million currently proposed with the overall budget?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. No, the 11.9 million is the total that's been approved for borrowing under this project. So yeah, it's 11.9 million for borrowing, $6 million grant, and we used 600,000, sorry, of community works that have been approved for this project. $900,000 is the city's contribution towards the access road, and then the balance is coming from the waste management reserves. And so no, there's no more borrowing that's being contemplated or approved for this project at this point.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That was my question too. So that's efficiency. Is there any further questions from around the table? Is Director Lennox, is your hand up?
No.
No. Okay, you're getting ready to vote. Okay, so it's seeing none, no more questions. I will call the question on the motion, which is to recommend that we the board go first to third reading at the board meeting. So all those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, that's a big one. On to new business. Item 9.1, Community Works Fund. Director McCormick, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the recommendation that is in our agenda. And if there is a seconder, I would like to speak to it.
Okay, Director Lennox and Director McCormick, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I've raised this issue a number of times, and my goal in putting the issue forward is to put the community into community works. This motion is about asking for a staff report. It's not about making any decision in the way we allocate community works funds. It's about asking for information from which we can have an informed discussion. So you might ask, why should we want this information? Well, it's because we seem to be out of sync with accepted common practice of a number of other regional districts regarding this allocation. I'm not implying any criticism of staff who do a fabulous job of implementing the direction of the board, and total commendation for them. But it's really about whether we as a board are providing the best direction that we possibly can. Our current policy regarding community works funds, and this is from a December 2021 report that we received on the subject, states that allocation of community works money will be considered first and foremost for the QRD's own corporate financial challenges. A report about 6 months later in June of 22 includes a survey that staff did regarding other regional districts and how they do things. And one question really jumped out at me, and it was the question, does your board prioritize spending based on asset criticality? Only one regional district out of 7 said yes. From that survey and from talking to other electoral areas directors, I was able to determine that many other regional districts allocate this funding directly to electoral areas. This is not talking about the city share. The city gets their own share, so they're not involved here. Some of those districts, Alberni, Clayoquot, Squamish, Lillooet, Kitimat, Stikine, Buffalo, Chaco, Mount Waddington, and even the Sunshine Coast. They may use different formulas, but they allocate 100% of their community works funding to electoral areas. Some split the funds, such as Cowichan Valley, which gives 30% to the regional district's corporate needs and 70% to electoral areas. Or the North Coast, which gives 10% to corporate and 90% to electoral areas. When I look at what's out there, I can't help but wonder if we should be doing things differently. So this motion is asking for information, and that's all. What we choose to do with that information, be it endorsing the status quo or making changes, that will be decided by us down the road. So I'm asking for your support for getting this information. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick. So I see Director Gisborne's hand.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely concur and support the intention of Director McCormick's motion. In the last term, we updated the Community Works Funds policy, I believe, in the summer of 2020, and it changed from the old policy, which was that it would be determined by the Rural Services Committee, or other regional districts referred to as Electoral Area Services Committee. We no longer have a Rural Services Committee or Electoral Area Services Committee. We, in the last term, then asked for a staff report, which we received on June 22nd of 2022, discussing the Community Works Funds allocation policy, which has a lot of the information that Director McCormick is referring to. Last month, the board passed a motion at our board meeting that the board directs staff to bring forward the report dated June 22nd, 2022, Community Works Funds Allocation Policy 3.12 to a future Finance Committee agenda. The discussion at that time last month was that we would bring that report that's already written to this Finance Committee meeting so that we could all have that information before us. So that way we're not having to ask the staff to write essentially the same report or updating it, because what the issue I think is before us is Community Works Funds is allocated to regional districts for the electoral areas only, like for our population of the electoral areas. And it's very common across the province that that funding is then allocated for electoral area services. Our current policy is, well, what's best for the region, and we kind of go that route. I don't like the current policy. I've said it before, I'll say it again. But I think the best way to I don't want to say fix it, but to be more consistent with other regional districts is to have our Community Works Funds policy in line with an Electoral Area Services Committee that is then being the decider for what are we doing with our Community Works Funds. And an Electoral Area Services Committee is open to municipal directors. I'm not saying it's, we close the door and no, the municipal directors aren't there. It's just a committee that's common in other regional districts that puts the emphasis on those rural services and kind of keeps those funding things separate. And that way it makes it very clear that no, the municipality is, not paying for a number of these electoral area services. And that's my thoughts on it. I want to support the motion, but at the same time, we don't have the June 22nd report in front of us that the board asked for last month. And that's where I'm wondering, should we postpone this motion until we get that information in front of us, so that way we can really dig down in what our ask is? Because that's what the board asked in March, was to get that report to us for this issue. And I think that should be in front of us out of respect for Director McCormick's intention, because this is an issue. And I thank Director McCormick for bringing this up. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of being a stickler, but that's there's a lot of good information in that June 22nd report. And I don't like the idea of getting staff to write more reports when we already have a lot of that information before it. So I want to hear what the rest of the committee has to think.
Thank you, Director Gisborne, and I'm confident that staff would refer to that report and hopefully use it if this went forward. So the motion before us is to recommend the board direct staff for a report. So Director Brender.
Doubt.
Oh, that's Director Doubt. Sorry.
I actually share, I think what Director Gisborne's concerns are is that we've already asked for one report to come back from staff that I was hoping would clarify a lot of the details of the Community Works Fund. We have some new members on the board here that haven't discussed it before. I'd like to understand completely the Community Works Fund and the current policies and the current program that we're doing before we add another report for staff to come back with. Maybe, I assume that staff would try to be consistent and with the previous reports, but there's a bit of a conundrum there asking for two reports on the same thing. We haven't got the June one back from last year, I think, and to be asking for another one, I think seems to be adding an extra workload to staff, maybe postponing them to get them to the point where we're talking about both in the same framework and the same information might be a good idea, because I think it's important to understand which taxpayers are contributing to them, which provincial money is being contributed exactly on behalf of which residents, and to sort that out. Because in my view, municipal taxpayers who pay taxes to the regional district are residents of the regional district too, and deserve full consideration in when we're making the decisions. So, I'm not going to make the motion myself, but postponing this until we get the previous report might make more sense, or having them both come forward at the same time might make some sense.
Thank you, Director Doubt. So Director McCormick.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. The report that is being asked for, the information that's being asked for with this motion is significantly different than what was in the June 22 report. And I'm surprised that wouldn't be on the website anyway under meeting agendas, so we could look it up. Anyway, it's for a different set of information, building on what is in the June 22 report and the December 21 report. This is continuing to build on that. So it's quite different information.
Thank you. Director Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. As it's been mentioned, as the new person trying to digest all of this, I need as much information as possible. And so if this motion recommendation actually adds to any increased information, the old report, I did expect to see it, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'll dig around and see if I can find it. But again, I'm prepared to support it if it brings us better information. I like the points that Director Gisborne raised, and I agree with them, considering possible policy revisions or what have you in the future. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any further debate on this item? Seeing no hands, I will call the question. So this is for the recommendation, the motion before us to recommend board direct staff for a report. All those in favor?
I have one question.
Okay, Director Gisborne.
So in March, the board asked for the June 22nd report to come to the future finance committee meeting. When is that report that's already written going to come to the finance committee meeting? Because I thought the discussion around the board table last month that it would come to this meeting.
I see Ms. Greenan with her. Ms. Jones. Ms. Greenan, do you want to answer that one?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, through the chair. We thought that the way that I understood the request that came to the previous committee of the whole meeting was to develop a report with options for how we might want to allocate the funds, whereas the June 22nd report just kind of gave information about how other regional districts do it. how other regional districts allocate their funds and use their funds. So what the thought was that staff was going to write a report using that information and some updated information from our surveys of other regional districts, and then give the board some options and then we were going to attach the June 22nd report as an appendices in that new report that comes forward. So yeah, if that's not what the board is looking for, then maybe the board could offer some clarification.
Thank you, Ms. Green. That was my understanding too. I see Director McCormick.
Yeah, and I fully support the process as Ms. Greenan has outlined. I think that would be a really effective way to go.
Very good. So we're clear on Director Gisborne. You had one last item.
Yeah.
Before we vote.
I thought I'd made it clear back in March that when we got to this item, we would have that June report before us. And I know it's not my job to clarify to staff what the board's intention was. I believe that's the chair of the district's responsibility. And this was something I asked for clarification in March to say, do we need to make the motion specific to have that report just brought before us when we discuss this item brought forward by Director McCormick? And memory serves it. No, the intention is fairly clear that we'll get that June 22nd staff report before us at this meeting. And now seems that there's something different's going on, and maybe I just need to be clear in the future. Thank you.
So the I mean the report's not on the agenda clearly, and we just heard it will be included as part of a report which would provide it again. It's available on the website as has been pointed out. I see Ms. Jones, did you have your hand up for comment, or are you?
No. I was just going to say that the motion did specify to a future finance committee, but it didn't say which one specifically. And we did know that from I think a previous motion that a community works fund report was coming forward in May. So there is already a few community works funds motions on that we've considered. And so there's quite a history here. So I think it was slated to come forward in May. Sometimes we actually had an additional week this week, but sometimes the board meeting occurs on the same day that agendas are distributed for committee meetings. So we typically wouldn't take decisions from this month's meeting and put it forward to the next month's meeting. So that's why you're seeing the space between when the decision was made in March and when it will come forward in May.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones. And I mean, clearly, I mean, we want to avoid having too many things in motion. So I think trying to tie these threads together and to bring them forward in a single report with the options and as appendices with background as has been discussed, I think makes a lot of sense, so that we can all have all the information before us and have one discussion on it. Director McCormick, I see your hand up. So hopefully we can wrap this up soon.
Yep, and this is, just in closing, I think that's a really sensible way to go, get all of the information together, and then we can have a really informed discussion about how we want to allocate community works funds. And so, yeah, I encourage people to support the motion because I think we need this information. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. So, all those in favor? Opposed? One opposed, I believe. Okay, so that'll go forward to the board. And Director Brander.
Chair, just curious if it'd be appropriate for me to make a notice of motion at this time, or if I missed my opportunity.
No, that's notice of motion is, I mean, fine. So what's the topic? Or I'll let you speak to it.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to make a notice of motion that I'll be bringing forward a proposal to the May Finance Committee meeting about allocating a portion of, or potentially all of, the funds that the QRD has received from the Growing Communities Funds towards the Resource Recovery Center, and asking City Council if they would consider contributing a portion of their allocation towards the project in an effort to reduce borrowing costs. Solid waste is one of the biggest costs to everyone in the whole region, and my motion will attempt to address this in a fair way. That's it.
Thank you for that. So there's a notice of motion, and the specific wording will come forward at our next meeting, and we can have a good debate about that at that time. Okay, so moving on, that's end of the new business. Question period. Is anyone in the audience or Mr. Galinsky, if you're there, if you have any questions, now is an opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. With regard to item 8.2, the Resource Recovery Center and Waste Transfer Station, unfortunately for me, Directors Gisborne and Palm asked most of the questions that I had, but I did have one. The Manager of Financial Services, Chair, specified a fairly detailed list of where money was coming from. She mentioned the Waste Management Reserve. So through the Chair, I'm wondering how much money is coming out of that particular fund.
Okay, Ms. Green, is that clear for you? If you may provide enlightenment on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was in 2022, $992,000 came from that fund, and then there's another $395,000 planned to come from that fund in 2023.
Okay, Chair, thank you very much. So the amount through the Chair was more than $1 million in that fund then that has been allocated towards the Resource Recovery Center.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yes.
That was my question, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Is there anyone else? I can't see the audience. I don't know if anyone else is there. I expect not. Okay, so there is no in-camera session. And so this brings us to the end of the meeting. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.